This is not the forum to talk about, well, I can't get this in the dining room, or why don't you have this in the dining room and all that. You'll probably want to say that, but please take it to the dining committee. This is going to be an academic presentation, not a place for kudos or complaints about the food here, okay? Second thing, the Mental Health and Wellness Committee, which is Margot Elkin, Tamara Oppler, Wayne Lavender, Pat Hauk, Rhea Stein, Liz Biegler. I don't see Norman Breyer, Jeffrey Gibson, and where is Evelyn and myself. For the May meeting, which is the second Friday of the month, we really are opening up and want to invite who would like to come 10 o'clock on May 9th in the art studio to this meeting and a follow-up to the meeting we're having tomorrow. We're having someone from the Commission for the Blind in Albany come talk to people about resources and things if you're losing your vision. But also, if you have any suggestions that you would like our committee to pursue, to bring speakers, or to have panel discussions, please feel free. We'd love to see you come on May 9th, and I'll mention it again at the end of the meeting. Okay, so we're very, very happy to have Tanya Lopez, who is a registered dietitian, who is an employee of Sodesco and works mainly, but not entirely, in the health center. And she's going to be presenting an academic presentation to us all, and there'll be time for question and answers. Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Today, what we're going to be speaking about is the gut-brain axis. This was by request, so thank you so much. This was very interesting to dive into and learn more. And basically, because I am a registered dietitian, what does nutrition have to do with it? So our agenda for the next hour we'll go through just a brief introduction. What is the gut-brain axis? We're going to go through the gut microbiota, and we're going to just briefly review the nervous system, just to make sure we're all on the same page. I don't remember when I went over this last, maybe high school, maybe college, maybe a little bit, during my master's. And then we're going to define dyssymbiosis. We're going to talk about research and why prebiotics versus probiotics. Then some practical applications. I want to make sure that you not only leave with some science information, but also what you can do to improve your gut microbiota. And then we'll make sure that we have time for questions. Okay, thank you, Pat. So let me briefly introduce myself. Thank you, Ronnie. I am Tanya Lopez, registered dietitian. I work here at the health center mostly. I'm a part-time employee for Sodexo. I also do consults here on IL. So I've seen several of the residents here on IL, usually with a referral from Mary Jo, especially when someone has a new diagnosis where medical nutrition therapy, that's what we call it, nutrition recommendations can help, right? So a little bit about my background. I won't bore you with the minute details of me starting off as an anthropologist. I have a bachelor's in cultural anthropology. I love people, and I love what makes a culture, what makes people come together. And food is a big one, right? So after that, I went to culinary school and worked in the kitchen a good 5 years at least, working catering, restaurants, baking, and I found myself just more and more interested in nutrition. So I thought, oh, how easy. I can just go back to school and become a registered dietitian. Well, this is what I wanted to show you. So to become a registered dietitian, nutritionist, you have to earn at least a master's degree in science. Clinical nutrition is what I have my master's in. And it had been a while since I had taken chemistry, biochemistry, microbiology, etc. So it was a lot more than I thought, but I learned. I absolutely loved it. So to become a dietitian, it gives you, you come into it with a whole lot of educational background. So us registered dietitians, we have a joke. We need to know the different types of cheeses, the sodium content in it, the type of tile that's okay to have in a kitchen, and also how to treat diabetes. That's all. That's just a little snippet of it all. So besides that, it's having at least a year of supervised practicum. So you work with another dietitian. The rotation includes food service management, community, and clinical nutrition. And then you have to pass your exam. And then to continue being a dietitian, you have to complete at least 75 credits every 5 years. And you can, do that in a specialty area. I'm also a certified diabetes educator. So that's where I used my time to earn some CEUs in that area. So I can go on and on about this, about how in depth your knowledge needs to be a dietitian. But hopefully, as we go through the presentation, you'll see a little bit of that experience. Thank you. So let's dive right in. So what is the gut-brain axis? So how many residents here have heard that term before? Good. Oh, good. We're starting with a lot of people that are already interested in it. So I just kind of want to briefly go over the definitions of some of these things to make sure that we are starting on the same page, right? So it's the bidirectional communication between the nervous system and essentially the gut. So it has always been thought that basically it was one direction. So coming from the brain, the spinal cord, and then those messages going out to all the other parts of our body, one being the gut. So with that being said, you might, even think about some sayings that are familiar, having butterflies in your stomach, right? That would be a message coming from your brain going to your guts, right? But the new research is showing that it's bidirectional, that it's not just coming from the brain to the central nervous system, but also the gut communicating with the brain so that it goes around and it's bidirectional. So what's interesting about this is now the research is showing, and they're calling it a second brain, that basically by having a good, healthy gut microbiota, that it can impact various areas of your health. And I know here we're specifically talking about mood, depression, and anxiety. So I want to preface this with the fact that this is very early. This is very early in research and studies. Most of the studies that have been done are in animals, in mice specifically. So the one study that I did bring that we will go over today is actually in humans. So we can continue. So what is our gut made out of? So it's microbiota. So I wanted to use this term versus probiotic because a probiotic is typically one singular strand of bacteria. There's going to be various types. So what people are usually familiar with is lactobacillus, right? That's one, or acidophilus. Those are the ones that you see that you can buy in the store readily. The microbiota is the community of the microorganisms that live in your gut. And so this could be bacteria, fungi, archaea, parasites, viruses. So you could see how some of these are positive and some of these are negative, right? Can cause a detriment to your gut. Another new discovery is that, well, number one, we knew that we always had trillions of human cells in our body. What they're finding is that there are trillions of these microbiota in your guts alone, starting from your esophagus down to your anal canal. So it's equivalent, the amount of cells that you'll have. The other thing is that it's individual. Not anyone here has the same microbiota. So what's fascinating about that, especially as a dietitian, and I think that many people don't realize, is that we are individuals. So as a dietitian, we treat people as individuals. No one comes the same. They may have various diagnoses that are the same. You know, what are the popular ones? Hypertension, hyperlipidemia, diabetes. But there are so many variables in that person, right? We can even just talk about environmental variables, social variables, how somebody eats, where they live, what kind of water do they drink. So it's individual per person. So genetics has a lot to do with that too. A healthy gut is one that's diverse in microbiota. So what we used to think was that having plentiful microbiota was the key. Now we're finding the diversity is the key to much of this. And we'll talk more about that. So we'll talk about what a healthy gut is versus what a unhealthy gut is. So the dyssymbiosis. Okay, briefly, the nervous system, right? So we know the central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord, right? So, and the automatic nervous systems are what produces the things that we don't even think about that happens, right? We're sitting here, we're breathing, don't have to give much thought to that, especially if we're healthy. The enteric is the nervous system that we are specifically speaking about because those are the actions that happen specifically in your gut and how they communicate to your central nervous system. So in this, there are more than 100 million nerve cells that line our whole GI tract. Not sure what's happening. Okay, maybe we'll try here. So with that being said, having those trillions upon millions of nerve cells and microbiota in your gut and how it's varied, it's difficult to study, right? Especially in a human population. So, and what it does is it controls digestion and GI action. So we have both the enteric, but we also have the central nervous system, go ahead, that controls things that we don't think about. So specifically digestion. I know, I'm trying to move my hair maybe. Okay, so like we said, digestion being one of those things that we don't think about. And that happens automatically. We do know that basically our emotions can affect our digestion. And now we're talking about vice versa. So the intestinal barrier is what you see there, that little curve. And basically, that is the intestines. So the part of the digestion that happens that we don't think about is right there. So that means moving through the GI system, the absorption of micronutrients, etc., in that small intestines. So there can be changes that happen here. So if you think about a healthy gut, what do you think? Any ideas of what you may be able to do to increase your gut health? Any ideas? We could start right there, so then we can see if we have any difference thereafter. What are some things? Absolutely. More greens and vegetables, more fiber. That would be one thing. Anything else? More water. Absolutely. That never hurts. Then on the flip side, what would be things that would impair our gut health? Yes, absolutely. It's interesting because there is a degree. There are some health benefits to having one glass of red wine, but we know when we have multiple, that's where we have increased inflammation. Stress is another one, right? So this specifically has to do with things like mental health. Oh, yeah, we're going to try that? Okay. Excuse me, everybody. Okay. Okay. So much better. Thank you for your patience there. Okay. So we talked about what can increase healthy gut flora. And now we're talking about what can decrease that. So alcohol, right? And we talked about how one glass of red wine might be okay, but more than that, that's where things get out of hand, right? Stress. So there's a lot of talk about mindful eating and stress causing inflammation, and that's where that dysregulation can happen in the gut. Okay, so this is just a picture of that bidirectional communication. So like I said, we thought it only came from the brain, spinal cord to the gut, but now what we're talking about is how it goes from the gut to the brain as well. So just a couple of things that I'm going to point out here is that there are nerve cells there. You may see some familiar things like short chain fatty acids and tryptophan. Those are the precursors essentially for things like dopamine, serotonin. So this is what happens on this level of the intestines that produces those beneficial hormones to your brain. Go ahead. All right. So now we're going more to research. I just wanted to go through a little bit of background. So dyssymbiosis. So what's interesting about this is that in these chronic illnesses, irritable bowel syndrome, type 2 diabetes, it was always thought that these illnesses, these diagnoses had impact on your gut. So anyone that has known anyone or unfortunately had any of these issues themselves might understand that their GI system was not working well, meaning more diarrhea, more constipation, anything like that. Now they're finding that there's a relationship that a dysregulated microbiota, an unhealthy gut, may be contributing to a lot of these illnesses. So like I said, more research has to be done, but that's a huge breakthrough, especially with things like multiple sclerosis, autism, obesity, and now what we're specifically talking about is anxiety and depression. So what causes dyssymbiosis? What causes that unhealthy gut, right? What do we want to avoid, essentially? So the SAD diet, right? The standardized American diet. Why did I put that pie there? That largest piece is fat. So with fats, what we know, there is no fiber. Fat causes inflammation, right? So, and other popular diet trends, right? I hear about them all the time, right? People coming to me about trying keto or whatever, diet fad is new, right? There's only 3 macronutrients. It's fat, protein, and carbs. So if you're taking carbs and fat away, there's only protein left, right? So it always needs to be balanced is the key. Balance is the key. So a lot of animal-based protein, saturated fats, sweeteners, and emulsifiers. Really, all these things cause inflammation. And that's what we're trying to avoid. Just like the stress, genetics, something we can't control, right? Medications. And this doesn't, I don't want anyone to walk away thinking that they can get off their medication and start pre or probiotics. It's just that they can cause other issues on their own, right? So there's a balancing act that your doctor and you do. Go right ahead. Okay, so the picture again. So the brain to the gut, and now the gut to the brain. But you could see how on the bottom there, it says dyssymbiosis. And these things that we're seeing now that play a part. So stress, psychiatric disorders, neurodegenerative disorders like dementia, for example, and obesity. Okay, so we're going to talk about prebiotics and probiotics. So what is a probiotic is what I want to start with first. It does say pre, but it's supposed to say pro. It's a substrate that is utilized by the host that confers a health benefit. So that's the key to all of this. So a probiotic or prebiotic has to demonstrate a health benefit. And what happens with these pre and probiotics is that they are not regulated by the FDA, right? So they're not required to do research and show that this particular probiotic or prebiotic is beneficial, right? So that's what's not happening. And what we're talking about with a probiotic or prebiotic is changing a whole ecosystem, right? It's different than taking a medication or a drug. So when you're taking a medication, a drug, there's usually one target, right? So if you're taking a medication for diabetes, let's say metformin, the whole point of it is for it to help you lower blood sugar. But we know even with a regulated medication, there's side effects, right? So the point of taking a medication is that the benefit outweighs the con, right? So if you're taking metformin, for example, and it's helped lowering your blood sugar, fantastic. But let's say it's causing chronic diarrhea. You want to outweigh those pros and cons, right? Because maybe there's a different medication for you then. Go ahead. Okay, so the study that we're going to take a look at is this from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. And it's an inulin-type fructan and fructolactose that's increased and alleviated stress mood state compared to the placebo, which is maltodextrin that they use, which is essentially a starch. So inulin and fructones, these are basically prebiotics. Okay. All right, so the study. So what was done here in this human study is that these 2 or 3 prebiotics were given. One was a blend versus the placebo was the maltodextrin, which is the starch. And so what they did was they did 2 tests. Any clinicians, any therapists here? No, therapists. Okay, so these were the 2 studies that they used. They used the PHQ-9 to assess for people that had mild to moderate depression. And then they used the GAD-7 to find people that had mild to moderate anxiety. So this was the group that they used to test on. And what they excluded was anyone that was taking probiotics or prebiotics, antibiotics, which of course we know kills all that good bacteria, and the history of any drug or alcohol use. Okay, no worries. So, one thing we hadn't mentioned before was the antibiotics specifically, because not only does that kill the bad bacteria, as we know, but also the good, right? Okay. All right. So the results. What was interesting about this is that the study produced not only an increase in the good bacteria that was already there, but it also increased the diversity. And so, like we said before, it's not only the quantity, but it's the diversity that really makes a difference in your gut. So besides that, it also improved consistency and frequency of bowel habits. So that's something that I'm seeing more often too, people using a pre or probiotic to help regulate their GI for regular bowel movements. And I just show this here because essentially this here is the improvements that's giving those prebiotics demonstrated, is that it improved the diversity in the type of bacteria. So in the type of prebiotics, as you see there on the right. Okay. So how do we can go back one. So basically, what do we have to take into consideration here in this study is that, yes, it was a human study versus that so many of them have been done in lab mice. It was a small study, though. And they studied those that had mild to moderate depression and anxiety. So, of course, this is not to think that this would compete with medication, but that in the future, what studies are showing now is that they're looking for to create psychobiotics. So basically, it would be a prebiotic, probiotic with some sort of medication to see if that can improve, anyone's depression or anxiety. So I'm excited to hear about that. So this, I don't expect you to see all this, but essentially what this shows is how few foods really have prebiotics in them. The ones that have the most essentially are chicory, inulin. You can get some from banana, but in the study, they use much higher doses than you can kind of get from a diet. And so that's really a big takeaway. So if you're looking to take a prebiotic, looking for chicory roots in a concentrated form would be the best option, because there aren't enough bananas in the world to get you all the prebiotics that you need. Go ahead. Okay. So now the practical, right? I want to make sure that everybody leaves with what they can do to improve their gut microbiota. So we have the triangle here, which is actually the food pyramid from Dr. Andrew Weil, which I recommend. And this is specifically the Mediterranean diet, an anti-inflammatory diet pyramid. So on the bottom, fruits and prebiotics. So you could see there, that's vegetables, fruit that start. Fermented foods, right? So what kind of fermented foods is everyone familiar with? Sauerkraut. Yes, pickles, right? Kimchi, yes. So that's a good spicy one. Anything else? There's yogurts, right? There's kefir. But yes, those are like the main ones. Sauerkraut, pickles, those are all good sources. Your fruits and vegetables are there, nuts, plant-based protein, right? If there's one food item that you can leave with is beans and lentils, right? These really have the prebiotics. Beans and what? Lentils. So, with all this being said, if you're leaving here and going from a diet that's low in fiber, and then all of a sudden you're eating beans, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you're going to have a little GI distress. We'll call it that. How's that? So anytime I recommend someone go from a low fiber diet to a higher fiber diet, I recommend that it's done slowly and gradually. So you can take a look at items that have more fiber and eat smaller quantities of that and build it up. And your gut will adapt and you'll be able to digest it better with less GI distress. Monounsaturated fatty acids and polyunsaturated fatty acids. So things like what olive oil specifically, right? That's the ideal. And if we're talking about the Mediterranean diet here, that's what they're going to be consuming a lot of. And the polyphenols. So these are the superfoods, right? Things that have bright colors to them. So berries specifically, a little bit of red wine, right, Larry? Chocolate, that could be one. So these are things that are included to improve the microbiota. So if you were going to leave here today and your desire was to improve your gut, not only for improvement of mood, of depression, anxiety, but also minimize that risk of those other chronic diseases, this would be what I would recommend to follow, right? Go ahead to the next one, please. Thank you. So again, the Mediterranean diets, I mean, of course, everybody wants, when they see me, they want the magic pill, right? They want me to say, take this 3 times a day and all your health problems will be solved. I wish it was that easy. When I visit with someone and we do a nutrition assessment, it takes at least an hour to get all the information, to look at blood work, to look at medications, to look at how they eat, a food diary, to make sure that it's individualized. So really, when it comes down to it, having a Mediterranean diet not only helps with mood, but with so many other chronic diseases. And we see this time and time again. So again, the diet that's high in fruits and vegetables. What do fruits and vegetables have in it specifically? Fiber, right? That's the key. That's essentially the key that's in prebiotics that feed the probiotics in your gut. So the plant-based beans, protein, so beans, legumes, nuts, like I said, all the same. But yes, the Mediterranean diet, hands down. Thank you. So I wanted to make sure that we left time for questions. But again, what I do here is not only do I help those at the health center that have more immediate health problems, but also I'm here available to you. I understand that there is a consult that's available to those on IL, especially if they have a new diagnosis that they feel like is nutritionally related, or they have an existing diagnosis that they may need more help with. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you. Thanks for your patience.
We're now open for questions.
This is just a comment. Coincidentally, in today's New York Times, in the science section,
Yeah.
there's a lengthy article about the bidirectionality between the nervous system and the gut. And the research is really complicated. Like animals, well, I don't want to get graphic, but they've been operated on so they really are not thinking about if they just smell, animals smell things and it changes the guts and therefore it changes their behaviors. And not only that, but well, anyway.
Yes, well, to address the smell part of it, that's part of our digestion. When we smell something, right away, we have enzymes that are released. So that's something that's part of our gut and can alter it. One interesting thing that there was one study specifically about bariatric surgery. And what they did was they tested the microbiota of those before getting bariatric surgery and then thereafter. Their microbiota completely changed. There's something called fecal transplantation, where they take, we'll just say, the gut microbiome from one person and insert it into another. And this actually works. So in one of the studies, it actually helped those lose weight. So you had someone on bariatric surgery that had bariatric surgery, their gut microbiome changed. They took that into an obese patient without the surgery and found that they lost weight. So, I mean, there's so much research out there. It's so fascinating. And then, what do we do with it, right? What are the treatments going to look like thereafter? But I'll have to look at that article.
Joe and then Ann.
Oh, yes. It looks like she's getting the mic over. Thanks.
I just have a comment and then I'll ask the question. So there was one thing I wanted to add, hopefully you agree, about the dangerous things for your gut. Things like pesticides and food additives and colorings and some of the things they put into, unfortunately, food that isn't organic. Mm-hmm. But when I was looking at your list, I realized one of my favorite foods hits both categories, beans and also fermented miso. Hits both of those. But now finally my question.
Okay.
So I take a probiotic and I also take a digestive enzyme capsule. How do you feel about those?
Well, not specifically knowing your background, I'm not sure why you'd be taking the enzyme.
I'm Italian, so I like to eat, but I eat the Mediterranean diet.
I'm familiar with that as a diagnosis. Well, the thing is, a couple of things there. What's great about these prebiotics, probiotics, and specifically enzymes is that they can't cause harm. If you have a GI issue, let's say IBS, and you're taking a multitude of probiotics and it's causing diarrhea, not a good sign. But essentially, what's great about this, like I said, is that they're not evoking harm. So a lot of times these prebiotics or probiotics aren't regulated by the FDA, you don't know what you're getting. So this is when I really recommend that you keep a food diary, because I've even seen it with myself where I have taken a probiotic and one does nothing, and then a different brand has positive results. So not only the food diary, but how long I've been taking that pre or probiotic and seeing if it's causing benefit, right?
And
Okay, thanks.
There's so much talk about gluten-free, gluten, okay, thank you. What the, having gluten or going with a gluten-free diet, what effect it does have if you have any digestive problems.
Right.
Because so what is your opinion about gluten and its role? Because it seems like some feel that it really does play a part and others think it does not actually, that it's not proven.
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. So we, of course, know that someone that has the diagnosis of celiac disease, they require a gluten-free diet, right? Because that's going to cause them harm ultimately. What has been shown is that we have evidence where there has been much more gluten intolerance. So why is that? We don't know. Do we know now that perhaps someone that has had GI issues for a long time has not realized their gluten intolerance? The detriment to the other part of this is that gluten-free products aren't necessarily nutritionally better. So they could be void of fiber. There's plenty of junk food snacks out there that claim to be gluten-free. So it's not going to help someone essentially if they're thinking they're going to improve their health just by going gluten-free. If anyone has a concern or question thinking that they may be gluten intolerant, to test, basically to just see, right? You start off day 1, no gluten. You see how long you can do that for, and I'm going to recommend 4 to 6 weeks going gluten-free. Then you reintroduce it and see if you have those issues again, whichever GI issues you had in the beginning. And I'll just tell you a personal story because as a dietitian, you hear all these diets, and I was skeptical. I was definitely skeptical because I had people coming to me all the time talking about gluten intolerance and being gluten-free as, a diet fad. And I had a doctor looked at my history and he said, you really should try a gluten-free diet. And I was like, I'm a dietitian. I know what I'm doing. I don't need to go on a gluten-free diet. Long story short, I tried it for 30 days, no difference. He's like, you got to do it longer. 3 months, went gluten-free, reintroduced it, and I really was able to pinpoint why I need to be gluten-free, long story short. So, but that goes along with basically any intolerance you might have. So anything that you may suspect that you're intolerant to, you remove it from your diet. And then after a time period, usually 4 to 6 weeks, you reintroduce it. It requires note-taking though, right? You need to make sure that you're taking good notes.
Oh, you said that you took one probiotic and it didn't seem to make a difference. And then you took another, made a difference. Were those pills or was that food?
Good question. It was actually pills in supplement form. So I do find that when you buy a probiotic, look for the ones that are in the refrigeration section. That's going to make a difference. It's going to keep it viable longer. But in the same regard, when you do have it in food, much better option. Much better option.
Are the probiotics alive in the sense that if you don't keep them refrigerated or you have them for too long, they die? That's what I've read.
Yes. So ideally, you buy in the refrigeration section and then you keep it refrigerated. And usually there's an expiration date underneath. But like I said, it's not a regulated food item. So to start with, you don't know how many live bacteria you're actually purchasing. So that's the challenge with it. And you may find, for a couple of reasons, you may find a brand that maybe the probiotic, the bacteria is not viable, right? There's not enough. Or maybe that is the probiotic that's not what you need. It's not beneficial for you. Little conundrum there. I know. I wish I had easy answers. Yeah, I can talk to you after.
Hi, Tanya.
Hi, nice to see you.
I have two questions. One of the slides
Mhm.
showed GLP-1. Is that the GLP-1 that is getting all the hype?
Absolutely. So what happens is that we know our brain speaks to our stomach, stomach speaks to the brain. So when you get that release of the GLP-1, which is that regulatory hormone that essentially tells your brain that you're full, that's what happens there. So a couple of things. So you have this in this intestinal wall. So if you have what's called a leaky gut, you may hear that, where the permeability, meaning the back and forth from your gut, is altered because of various illnesses, we'll say. What happens there is that the GLP-1 may not reach to the brain. So meaning it may not tell your brain that you're full. So these are one of the things that are happening and that they're finding with obesity, that they're not feeling that satiety. They're not feeling that feeling of fullness, right? And so you're hearing a lot of the medications now, Manjaro, et cetera, that is helping improve that reabsorption of that GLP. So making it more available to tell your brain that you're full, and that essentially you stop eating.
My second question, a lot of times when people are like overtired and getting depressed, they usually reach for one of two things, sugar or caffeine, or both.
Yeah, right.
Or, yeah, well, yeah, not me. But actually, that's just the opposite. And you need a natural sugar more than jelly beans or something.
Right, or sleep.
Well, yeah, but
Right. So there were some studies that showed how basically your GI microbiota is altered with lack of sleep. So that could be because you have increased inflammation when you don't get adequate sleep, right? Basically, this is the time period that our body rests and the cells rejuvenate. So if you're not able to get adequate sleep and you don't have these cells rejuvenating, then basically you're left with the things that should have been removed from your body. We'll say toxins in this case. So it's this balancing act. So, to present in a short period of time, one topic is challenging because we know there's so many variables in all of it. Thanks. Did I answer your question? Okay.
If you don't know what's setting you off, is there any sense to try what used to be called, maybe still as an elimination diet, where you just eat, say, rice for a certain number of days, and then you gradually introduce the other foods to see if it sets you off? And how long should you remain just on the rice, for example?
So yes, elimination diets. I would say no to removing everything, because then we know that your risk of malnutrition is high. And not only is that going to cause problems, but then you're going to mask what is the real culprit. So it's about trying one at a time. So let's say you suspect gluten, then you remove that for 4 to 6 weeks. And yes, this takes a long period of time. You reintroduce it. Let's say that's complete, that hasn't been causing an issue. Then you remove, let's say, soy, and you go through each one, and then you reintroduce it after 4 to 6 weeks and to see if you have an intolerance to that food item. So long period of time, specifically with IBS, there's a diet called FODMAPs, and there's lots of different starches, essentially, that your body can or cannot tolerate. So I have worked with people to go through FODMAPs, and it's not what you might think. You may think like, oh, it makes complete sense. Remove this food group. No, it's about a quantity of each section. And I see some heads nodding, so people have tested this. It can be done, and there's great resources out there as far as websites and apps that can help people go through a FODMAP diet, which is eliminating and reintroducing a food group in that FODMAP.
Tanya, are you available individually if any of us want to consult with you to work out one of those regimes? Are you available?
Absolutely. So, what I would do, something is Mary Jo retiring, something like that happening,
Yeah.
right? So I know we're going to be getting someone new, and I will supply her with, my contact information. I did put my
You
contact
want us to go
information
through the
here.
nurse. You want us to go through the nurse.
That's probably the best option.
Okay.
But I have no qualms, with you reaching out to me with any questions or any issues. Being that I'm part-time, it may take me a little time to get back to you. But, honestly, I love what I do. So I want to hear what you have to say, how I can support you. Because honestly, a dietitian wants to work on prevention. There are plenty of diagnoses out there, unfortunately, that is going to keep us in business, right? There's so many lifestyle behaviors that people can change for things like hypertension, hyperlipidemia, diabetes. But when I can see someone when they're feeling like something is a little off, but they're not the health center yet, fantastic. Because when someone's at the health center, what they need at that point, as far as nutrition, is different than the pre and then also the post. So when I see someone there, I give them the recommendations for that time period, but then it may change once they're discharged.
Anyone else who hasn't asked a question yet? Jean, I'll come back to you.
Can I ask you, can exercise do with those probiotic and stuff? Can that help with that?
That's a great question. So absolutely, as far as exercise reduces inflammation. And so if it's not taking a pro or a prebiotic, but you are exercising, that's reducing the inflammation that you have in your body, in your guts, meaning that you'll get better absorption of nutrients. You'll have more viable gut microbiota, right? So that's the simple answer to it. So absolutely, absolutely.
I get a lot of people asking, as a vegan, how do you get your protein? How do you get your vitamins? How do you get calcium? And it's very hard to explain. And yes, some of it is with supplements, but most of it is just mixing and matching. Can you kind of, in the short, explain how cutting out things actually can add things? I think that's the way to.
Sure. Well, even if we're using this, Mediterranean diet model, is that you don't only need meat to give you adequate protein. Everyone's protein needs are going to be different. It's specific to you. There's a range, but there's plenty of beans, lentils, nuts that are going to be able to provide adequate protein as long as you ensure that you're consuming a certain amount of protein in every diet. But it's absolutely possible. And I see people all the time. And the other nutrients, those are the easier things to come by with having fruits and vegetables. There's no doubt about that. Sometimes you will need, depending on the person, a calcium supplement or a vitamin D supplement. B12 could be one too. But if you have a question regarding that, you just get blood work done or take a multivitamin. People that eat meat take a multivitamin or supplement. So it doesn't necessarily mean someone that's a vegan or vegetarian is less healthy, we'll say, right? Just as, they say health comes in all sizes. So people always think as a dietitian, they're the first ones to judge someone on their size. Not at all. It's vice versa. It's about asking questions and seeing how they live and how they eat, because you may have someone that's thin, very thin, and that doesn't mean that they're healthier. That's someone that looks like they're overweight. So it's specific towards a person, making sure that they're meeting their nutrition needs.
Could you wait just a minute for the mic? Thank you.
I wonder if you could make a comment or two on sugar. It's so prevalent in our culture. I personally have to avoid it, but it's very difficult.
It's so true. Well, and what did we do? In the 50s, it was avoiding fat, right? So what did we do to add flavor to food, to packaged food specifically? We added salt and we added sugar, and lots of it. And it's really hard to find food that doesn't have sugar. I'm raising a 7-year-old, and you're constantly looking at packages and trying to find any sort of snack food that they can take to school with them that doesn't have added sugar to it. So it's something that we've done as a culture. We've accepted at that point, we accepted a low-fat diet. And then what we were given were foods that were high in salt and sugar. So to get around that, it's about avoiding packaged foods, right? So going with the fruits and the vegetables and the nuts and the whole grains, and reading packages. And I know it's hard, especially for people then to change their tastes, right? Once you have a high fat, high salt, or high sugar diet, and then you're trying to take those things away. Yeah. So it's an adjustment. And everyone's palate, is also a little different.
We have time for one more.
I'm wondering if you have a guide sheet, or if you have handouts that have some of these ideas that you presented in a written form, so that persons who haven't become familiar with all these terms, et cetera, could be guided along the way.
Fantastic. Happy to. So if you're interested, you can reach out to me. There's my email, Lopez. Let me know that you're interested. I can either print you a copy or email it to you, whichever you prefer.
You can also, if you want, Tanya, leave a copy with concierge, and then they can make the copies for people who ask.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. Happy to do that. Thanks.
Anything that's really urgent. If not, we'll.
Health food supermarket stores.
Gotcha. Well, you can utilize both. That's what I do. If you're looking to save some money, right, you can definitely go to the supermarket. And these days it's so much easier. They have, that health food aisle. At the same time, you want to be careful because there's so many health foods that are really junk food, right? And very expensive junk food at that. But buying real whole foods is what it comes down to. And then, supplement as you need to with the snacks at the health food store. We have a very good health food store here in New Paltz, I think, right? Yeah, yes. Yes.
Did everybody hear, Pat? We have a good health food store,
Yeah.
New Paltz, and they deliver.
Yeah.
Any other? Okay, well, Tanya, thank you so
Oh,
much.
thank you so much.
This was a wonderful
Yeah,
presentation.
Thank you. This was
And don't
fun.
forget, if you want any follow-up or you have other ideas that you would like the Mental Health and Wellness Committee to think about presenting, please come to our next meeting, March 9th. It's a Friday, 10 a.m., the Art Studio. I mean, May. Did I say March? May 9th. Thank you.